You check under the bed and make sure there's no Disney executives under there.
Oh, not again.
Yeah, only this time, it wasn't just me. They were taking all my favorite people and replacing them with diverse women complaining about the patriarchy.
Rachel Zegler thought the worst had already happened. Her casting as Snow White in Disney's live-action remake had sparked months of fierce backlash. Critics called it a tone-deaf reboot, fans hated the dramatic changes to the classic story, and interview clips of Zegler slamming the original fairy tale went viral for all the wrong reasons. She called the original prince a stalker, mocked the idea of true love, and said the new Snow White wouldn't be saved by a man.
You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Her words ignited outrage across the internet. People accused her of being arrogant, ungrateful, and out of touch. Still, despite all the headlines, it seemed like things were finally settling. The trailers had come and gone, the movie was flopping quietly, and Zegler had faded from the trending pages. But just when the storm was dying down, South Park dropped an episode that dragged it all back into the spotlight, harder and louder than before. The South Park episode didn't just mock Disney, it surgically dismantled everything Rachel Zegler had said, done, and stood for during the Snow White press tour.
Nothing has brought me greater joy than watching the Walt Disney Company absolutely panic over the last few weeks. They're mad at South Park because they're making fun of their woke ideologies, constantly race swapping or religion swapping everything in their movies.
The parody, titled Woke White, The Reinvention, opened with a darkly comedic twist. Snow White lying lifeless, waiting for a prince who never comes. Instead, she's revived by a no-nonsense female doctor who lectures the audience about gender politics, toxic masculinity, and liberating fairy tales from their colonial roots. The character, a clear caricature of Zegler, delivers lines that eerily mirror real-life interviews.
You think it's perfectly normal that Cartman is suddenly a black woman?
You probably don't like that Indiana Jones got replaced by a female either, huh? Probably have a problem with Black Spider-Man, too.
I don't need a man, she snaps, and if you do, maybe you're the problem. Viewers didn't need subtitles. They recognized the script. Zegler's past comments about the original story being weird and outdated were nearly replicated word for word, just exaggerated enough to sting. The character struts through the kingdom, interrupting traditional fairy tale moments to drop buzzwords like patriarchy and systemic oppression.
The last time I had the dream, I was walking down the school hallway. And then I see Butters, and he's like, "Hey Eric, you want to see what my mom packed me for lunch?" And that's when I start to notice that something's wrong. Everyone I cared about has been systematically replaced. And finally I want to scream, and I'm like, why are they replacing every single character with someone who is diverse?
Instead of woodland creatures and cheerful songs, the new Snow White lectures peasants on privilege, scolds dwarves for toxic labor dynamics, and rants about how true love is a capitalist fantasy. Meanwhile, the South Park boys sit in a theater watching the movie with horrified expressions. Cartman blurts, "This isn't Snow White. It's a TED Talk with a crown." The parody was ruthless, sharp, and deliberate. It didn't just mock the film, it mocked the messaging, the marketing, and especially Zegler herself.
But then Kenny's like, "It's not our fault, it's because of Kathleen Kennedy." But then Kathleen Kennedy says like, "It, make it more lame." And everyone in town is like, "No, please, Kathleen Kennedy, stop ruining everything." But Kathleen Kennedy is all like, "Put another gay diverse woman in it, make it more lame." And the Disney stock just keeps going down and down and down. And then Bob Iger is all like, no, what's going on with my stocks? No, Kathleen Kennedy.
Social media erupted within minutes. Clips of the episode flooded TikTok and Twitter, with millions of views in less than 24 hours. Fans dissected every line, pointing out how closely the show mirrored Zegler's real quotes. Hashtags like #SnowWoke and #ZeglerExposed trended globally. YouTubers posted reaction videos calling it the most savage South Park episode in years. Even major entertainment outlets like Variety and The Wrap published articles acknowledging the striking similarities between the parody and Zegler's actual statements.
Exactly what they're doing, and that is why we hate the diversity, equity, and inclusion casting and writing in movies.
The internet wasn't just laughing, they were dissecting, comparing, and piling on. For many, this wasn't just a cartoon roasting a celebrity. It was a cultural moment. Zegler had become a symbol, and South Park had turned that symbol into a national punchline. Rachel Zegler wasn't just embarrassed, she was furious. As clips of the South Park episode went viral, her legal team sprang into action. Within 48 hours of the episode airing, a cease and desist letter was sent directly to Comedy Central's legal department.
This is no ordinary apple, my dear. It's a magic wishing apple.
A wishing apple?
You offer it to me freely. In place of the patriarchy, you would have a queen! Not white, but diverse, inclusive, and equitable! I will become the leader I know I can be! All shall love me and despair!
Oh, what has she done to you? Fear not, First Love's kiss can break any curse.
The document, reviewed by Deadline, accused the network of defamation, character assassination, and malicious intent. It claimed the parody had crossed the line from satire into targeted personal harassment and demanded the immediate removal of the episode from all streaming platforms, including Paramount+, Hulu, and official Comedy Central reruns. The letter argued that the portrayal of the princess was a direct mockery of Zegler, not just a parody of a fictional character, and that it had caused irreparable reputational harm.
What would you say to those who are just kind of overly critiquing the film at this point? You've worked so hard on it.
But Comedy Central wasn't budging. Their legal team fired back just as swiftly, citing long-standing protections under the First Amendment. The episode, they stated, was clearly satirical and fell squarely within the bounds of protected speech. They referenced Hustler magazine versus Falwell, the landmark Supreme Court case that defended satire as a form of free expression, even when it causes emotional distress. With ironclad precedent on their side and decades of controversy-tested experience, Comedy Central made their position clear. The episode would not be pulled.
Like, who has been the most exciting person for you tonight?
Oh my god.
Besides me.
Took the words out of my mouth. Besides.
As the legal battle gained traction, the public response turned even more brutal. Memes of Zegler's alleged meltdown began to circulate. Fan-edited videos contrasted her past statements with scenes from the South Park parody, frame by frame. Twitter users shared side-by-sides of Zegler's interviews and the animated Snow White, calling it the most accurate impression of a celebrity in years. Fan forums, Reddit threads, and entertainment blogs exploded with commentary. Every attempt Zegler made to push back seemed to amplify the story even more. By trying to silence the episode, she'd unintentionally poured gasoline on the fire. The backlash spilled over into mainstream coverage. Entertainment Tonight ran a segment analyzing the controversy, while Good Morning America covered the parody's viral impact. Even legal experts weighed in. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz told The Hollywood Reporter that Zegler had virtually no case and would likely lose in court. Online polls showed overwhelming support for South Park, with viewers praising the show's fearlessness and comedic accuracy.
When I was a child, I used to think Snow White was a Japanese lady. She has geisha-like pale skin, black hair, and tends to 7 ugly white men.
Instead of sympathy, Zegler received ridicule. What might have been a single edgy episode had now become a legal and cultural spectacle, one where she was no longer just the subject of a joke, but the face of a failed attempt to cancel comedy itself. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse for Rachel Zegler, the unthinkable happened. The Simpsons joined the attack. In a new episode that aired barely a week after the South Park fallout, the iconic animated series introduced a fake movie trailer titled Snow Woke: The Reimagining. The satire was cutting, and the timing was no coincidence. The animated princess in the trailer looked unmistakably like Zegler. Same haircut, same posture, same smug expression. She marched across the screen, wagging her finger at peasants while shouting lines like, "Love is a lie invented by straight men," and "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to dismantle systems."
All that walking made me sleepy. This bed's too hard. This bed's too soft. And this bed is just like the first one. Also too hard. I guess I'll sleep in the one that's too soft.
The trailer ended with the character screaming at a mirror that refused to validate her before collapsing into a pile of participation trophies. The parody lit the internet on fire. Viewers were stunned that even The Simpsons, a show owned by Disney, had turned its humor against the very studio that signs its checks. Disney didn't issue a comment, but the silence only fueled the speculation. People began questioning whether there was internal resentment brewing within the company over the Snow White reboot. Articles from Deadline and IndieWire pointed out that several longtime Disney animators had already expressed frustration with the remake, calling it soulless and corporate cosplay. Now it looked like even the company's longest-running show was voicing that frustration through sharp, biting satire. Meanwhile, Zegler's team was falling apart. Her publicist abruptly resigned, according to a verified report from Variety, citing strategic misalignment. A press tour for her upcoming film was postponed without explanation. Promotional banners for Snow White were quietly pulled from Disneyland's Main Street. Influencer partnerships promoting the movie were suddenly re-evaluated, with at least 2 fashion campaigns halting their social media rollouts. Merchandise sales, already sluggish, dropped even further. Disney analysts admitted on a call with investors that the film had underperformed expectations, though they stopped short of naming names. Online, the piling on was relentless. TikTok creators turned the 2 parodies into audio trends. Instagram Reels featured mashups of Zegler's interviews over footage of animated meltdowns. Even celebrities began to chime in. Comedian Tim Dillon called the situation the funniest Hollywood implosion in years during a live podcast. Joe Rogan brought it up in an episode, calling the backlash deserved. Suddenly, Zegler wasn't just the face of a failed movie, she was a full-blown meme. Her name was trending almost daily, and none of it was good. The entertainment world had made up its mind. She was no longer the next big star. She was the cautionary tale.
You always want to tell a fun, exciting story, and every time I've ever made a movie, I go into it going, I want this to be the best movie ever made.
Or what?
They're leaning into woke. Hardcore.
They're petrified of some kind of backlash.
I wanted my money back. It was very disappointing.
Who wants a movie about true love? What kind of woman do we want out there seeking true love, Eliana? The outrage.
Every way that Disney changed the story, it changed it for the worse.
They are pretending like Rachel Zegler is the first of them all when she looks like Lord Farquaad in the film.
The new Disney boss babe, who is Rachel Zegler, the inverse of happy.
So she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie.
Then, just when the chaos seemed to be cooling off, Rachel Zegler made a move that reignited everything. In a late-night post on X, formerly Twitter, she wrote, "I tried to do something different. I guess people just want the same old fairy tales." The tweet was up for less than 20 minutes before it vanished, but by then, it had already been screenshotted, reposted, and analyzed to death. The wording was vague, but the implication was loud. She wasn't backing down. Whether it was a veiled jab at critics, a goodbye to Disney, or a frustrated confession, the internet took it as confirmation that Zegler still didn't get it. Within hours, hashtags like #RachelQuits and #SnowWokeMeltdown were trending again. Commentators debated whether the tweet was part of a larger PR strategy or just an emotional outburst. Some speculated it was a sign she'd been dropped from future Disney projects. Others claimed it was her final attempt to play the victim card. But what united everyone, critics, fans, even neutral observers, was the sense that Zegler had lost control of the narrative. What began as backlash to a few off-putting interviews had turned into a cultural avalanche she couldn't outrun. Behind the scenes, the damage was already done. A leaked internal memo from Disney's marketing department, reported by The Wrap, confirmed that Zegler had been pulled from upcoming campaigns. Her face, once central to the Snow White reboot, was being quietly scrubbed from merchandise mock-ups and promotional artwork for Disney Plus releases. The company, according to the memo, was shifting focus to the brand and away from talent-driven narratives. And that wasn't all. A Netflix limited series Zegler had been signed to lead entered what the platform called a creative reshuffle. Her name was suddenly missing from casting updates. Studio insiders confirmed to Variety that producers were reconsidering options. That same week, an awards panel quietly removed her from its rising star shortlist. Rachel Zegler, once positioned as Hollywood's next Golden Girl, had become something studios now saw as risky.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged. There's something wrong with her. She's disturbed, she's unhappy, and she thinks it's about feminism and the patriarchy and about abortion. But the reality is she's just not stable, like the majority of people in Hollywood.
polarizing, unpredictable, and surrounded by controversy. Not because she played Snow White, but because of how completely the fallout from that role had engulfed her career. The cartoons didn't ruin her image. They simply held up a mirror and amplified what audiences had already begun to feel. In the span of just 1 year, Rachel Zegler's trajectory flipped from breakout star to industry cautionary tale. What began as a dream role, leading a $200 million Disney remake of Snow White, turned into a career-altering disaster. The animated parodies from South Park and The Simpsons didn't invent the criticism, they crystallized it. With biting accuracy, they echoed what audiences had been shouting online for months, that Zegler had alienated fans not just with a bad film, but with her attitude, her words, and her complete disconnect from the story she was hired to tell. Hollywood noticed. Fast. Casting directors who once scrambled to attach her name to projects began second-guessing. Executives whispered about optics and brand risk during meetings. Even talent agencies, always focused on marketability, started backing away. One report from The Hollywood Reporter confirmed that a major studio had pulled her from the shortlist for a new superhero franchise reboot, citing public sentiment. For an actress who just a year earlier had been celebrated as the future of the industry, the fall was steep and very public. Fans, too, had moved on. Zegler's online following, once filled with supportive young audiences who admired her confidence and candor, grew quiet. Engagement plummeted. Each new post brought more backlash than praise. Her TikTok videos, once viral hits, were now flooded with clown emojis and sarcastic soundtracks. Even her defenders had gone silent, unsure how to justify the growing wave of parody, failure, and fallout. Disney, true to form, never made a dramatic statement, but their actions spoke volumes. The studio refocused its promotion on upcoming animated projects, quietly pivoting away from the live-action era that had sparked so much criticism.
Rachel Zegler is not having her year where her Snow White movie is going to lose $200 million for Disney, but doing so, she also screwed over Tangled in the process. When Rachel Zegler was cast as Snow White, she joined one of Disney's biggest franchises, which was Disney Princess, where they've done $45 billion in merchandise sales just in the last 25 years.
Even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed, because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie.
Now, of course, as we covered, the movie is terrible anyway in its own right. It was probably going to underperform regardless. People are tired of the soulless cash grab remake thing.
Internally, executives began reevaluating their modern remake strategy. And while Snow White remains available on streaming platforms, it's been buried beneath more popular content, no longer highlighted, no longer celebrated. For Rachel Zegler, the silence was louder than any headline. No official cancellation, no dramatic exit speech, just a slow fade. Interviews drying up, casting rumors disappearing, and the once glowing spotlight shifting to the next new face. In Hollywood, where perception is everything, she became the one thing no rising star can afford to be, a punchline. And the most brutal part? It didn't take a scandal. No leaked tapes, no arrests, just words, spoken on a press tour, echoed by cartoons, and immortalized by a public that wasn't laughing with her. They were laughing at her, and in the business of fame, that's a scar that doesn't fade easily.